Analyzing life.
Considering the answers.
The John Passadino Show.
With guest
Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds.
Welcome to the John Passadino Show. I am John Passadino. And in this episode, I welcome Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds has 35 years of public service experience and currently serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer of Family and Children's Association based in New York. In addition to being a coach and consultant, he is also an avid runner, having completed 4 Long Island marathons and 5 New York City marathons, plus 30 triathlons and 7 Ironman races all over the country. Wow. During those competitions, he was diagnosed with cancer twice, and he's chronicled the parallels between his athletic training and competing with his battles with cancer. He's done that in an award-winning book, Every Mile Matters, Turning Training into Cancer Triumph, and that book is available on Amazon. Welcome, Dr. Reynolds.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you a little bit today.
Thank you. I finished the book. It was, I truly enjoyed reading it on so many levels because, first, getting past your athleticism and your battles with cancer, you say so many things from a personal point of view and from a guy point of view that I don't normally hear. Like, for example, you talked about friendship and about being isolated at times and how it's important to have friendships. And I was like, wow, this is like this guy is saying this. Guys don't normally say that. Yeah. So I was really enjoyed that. And you talked about your spirituality too. And I have some quotes I'll get into. I really enjoyed those. And you philosophized a great deal, talking about death and, what we're made of and all that other stuff. So it was really an odyssey going through that book. And so I wanted to point that out, that I truly enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
And let's take it back to my introduction. I want to talk about the marathon. So I was just talking to my wife. I said, I can't imagine, because I'm a New Yorker, by the way, everybody, and I can't imagine running over just the Verrazano Narrows Bridge alone, let alone going through the 5 boroughs. Yeah. What is it like? You describe it in the book, but what's it like to run a marathon through 5 boroughs of the biggest city in the world?
Yeah, John, it's an absolutely amazing experience. And, I guess that's what the difference between folks that do endurance sports and those who have found another vocation or something else to do with their spare time. It's actually fun, right? And so there is the finish line, and most people would imagine, well, the finish line's got to be the best part. And the finish line is pretty sweet, don't get me wrong. But for me, it was the journey. And, my foray into running, started in my mid-40s. I was not an athlete to begin with. I, in fact, was thrown off the track team in 9th grade for getting the other kids to smoke. And it was it all started in a bar in Tampa when I was there for a professional conference, and a bunch of us were in a bar doing what you do at 2 a.m. during a professional conference, and somebody said, hey, you want to do a 5K in the morning? I'm like, in like 3 hours? Okay, yeah, sure, why not? And so I show up at the start line, wearing shorts that are not engineered for running, wearing shoes that are certainly not engineered for running, and the undershirt that I was going to wear under my suit that day. The gun goes off, I take off like a bat out of hell, and 90 seconds later, I am huffing, puffing, cursing, and walking. And I'm like, I'm in my mid-40s. I can't be in this bad shape. And so I turned in a time of 36 minutes. And my personality is such that at that point, there was only one thing to do. I finished in 36 minutes. I went back to my hotel room and frantically started registering for 5K races back at home, looking for redemption. And so I got that redemption. A couple years later, I came back to that conference and actually won the 5K. But for me, running, it was, and again, this is the way I do things, 5K at some point wasn't enough. I took on 10Ks, did a half marathon, then did a full marathon, did 15 of those in total. And then it wasn't bad enough to be mediocre at one sport. I needed to actually suck at 3 sports. And so I took up swimming, biking, and running. And there too, the distances got longer over time. One of the things I write about in the book is mile 18 of the marathon, and I drew the parallel between being there and then 2/3 of the way through my chemo treatments. And mile 18 of the marathon is a really dark and lonely place. It's just, you've got a couple hours out on the road, your body has begun to break down, your nutrition has begun to break down. You're not close enough to be finished, and so you're in like that valley where it's like, this just sucks, and your mind starts playing games with you. You could just stop, you could walk, nobody really cares. You're getting the same free banana and bottle of water and dumb metal you can't even wear to work at the end of it. This is crazy, just stop.
Yeah.
But you just keep going, right? And so part of that for me was getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, acknowledging the uncomfortability. Yeah, this sucks. Yeah, my body hurts. And then you acknowledge it and you put it aside and you keep going. And before you know it, you're at mile 23 or 24. And it's like, all right, well, I only got like another 20 minutes out here. I can do 20 minutes. And you go across another finish line. And so for me, it's in a world that is very much engineered for our comfort, right? I want dinner tonight. I can hit up an app and have some guy making a few bucks, deliver food to me. I get in my car. If it's hot outside, I've got seats that'll blow cool air up my butt. If it is warm outside, and so we've got all of the conveniences built around us. That's not how we were built from an evolutionary standpoint, right? You wouldn't survive.
Yep.
And so I really became attracted to that whole notion of building strength, grit, resilience, determination by voluntarily putting myself in really uncomfortable situations. And I found that it helped me, not only in getting through cancer, and I know we'll talk about it, but in navigating life. There's uncomfortable moments in life. If you willfully sign up for those in other areas of your life, then uncomfortable moments in the office, uncomfortable moments in relationships, and pretty much anywhere else just become more second nature and less cataclysmic.
Yeah, I was thinking about, as you were speaking about, a term that came up in a book I read many years ago, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. It was one of the first big self-help books. Yeah. And he said one of the issues with people, Americans, because, America is the land of plenty for most, anyway, we know. And he said delaying gratification is a big problem with people. They do not allow themselves. They want it immediate. And even some more so today with the apps, like you said, the TikToks and the social media, everybody's getting a quick dopamine hit, which you talk about the chemicals in the book too. Yeah. And how you get that naturally though through running. But I think you said you didn't achieve a runner's high though.
Yeah, only occasionally. It was weird because once you start out running, you're like, oh, I'm looking for this runner's high, and you spend the entire run looking for it. What I will say, there are moments of serenity, and I'm somebody who cannot meditate in the traditional kind of way. So if I lay down and put on meditative music and that my brain races, it's just not for me. I've tried it a million times, but put me out in a snowstorm as it begins and the snow dampens all the sound around you and I can look back and see my footsteps. I could run for hours. No music, no headphones, really no traffic outside. And then I get myself in exactly the right headspace. And, I've never regretted a single workout I've done. And invariably, problems that seem this big when you go out on a run suddenly seem this big when you get back.
Well, that serenity that you're talking about, I actually ran cross-country track briefly at Christ the King High School, Middle Village, Queens. And the best parts of the run, because I was not competitive, were when we were running in these huge parks in the Bronx or wherever we were. I can't remember the name of the main park. But when I was actually alone on a trail walking through, like, I'm not used to this. So like, I'm by myself. I mean, everybody's run ahead of me, but I actually felt some level of serenity that I think you might feel along the way.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Now, the other thing I was going to talk about is how the generations have changed. I'm the son of two second-generation immigrants. All my grandparents came here as immigrants from Italy, and they had a really rough time. They didn't speak English. They didn't have money. My father was one of 12. My mother was one of 7, and all that. And they somehow, all of them, learned to be productive citizens despite that. But my grandfather, on my father's side, was, he was a cook, but he did not do well. He was an alcoholic, and he had a tragic end and all that. Yet the children worked their way up. And I wonder if it's because they saw him as an example and how I don't want to end up like him. I never really got that answer. They didn't want to talk about him. But going back to, part of it was survival too, I think. But I wanted to ask you, where are your roots in that? Is that all self-made with you, or did your parents or grandparents set an example on how to push yourself and survive and thrive?
Yeah, it's hard to say. So I grew up in largely a single parent household. At times the child welfare system was involved in my home life, for better or worse. And my mother struggled mightily with chronic alcoholism and eventually died of the disease. For me, that kind of put me on edge to say, all right, and I talk with my kids about it now to say, look, our family, my son has a whole series of allergies, nut allergies and that kind of thing. And I've said to him, he's 15 now, I'm like, so you got another allergy that we don't really talk about as much, and that's an allergy to booze. And people in our family are now genetically predisposed that if you if you consume alcohol on a regular basis, you are far more likely than the kid sitting next to you in class to develop an alcohol dependence. And this is something that's genetic, and so we need to be aware of it. We need to understand it, particularly as my kids get older. And so, I think for me, part of it was I probably needed more help as a kid than I got, although I was able to get some help, and that was a great thing. I'll never forget, and I wrote about it in the book. I don't know if you remember this part, but I had a ninth grade teacher the same year I got thrown off the track team who said to me, Reynolds, either things are going to go really good for you or really bad, and I'm just not sure which way you're going to go. At 59, I still remember that conversation, right? And so, perhaps I didn't take it as a challenge at the time, but maybe it was because I still remember it this many years down the line. I'm not oblivious to the fact that that's what brought me to health and human services. Very often people who go into social work are going to the nonprofit world. Somebody will say, oh, how'd you get into this? Well, I just kind of fell into it, or I'm a people person. And I'm like, that's not why. That's not why. And so for most of us in this space, there's something that led us to want to help others and to dedicate our lives to that. And so for me, it was my upbringing. It was my childhood. Look, things could have been better, but things could have certainly been worse. And I encounter folks every day who've got it a heck of a lot worse than I ever did. And one of the surreal moments in dealing with cancer was really being on the other side of that helping equation. I've always found incredible power in the willingness of folks to come to organizations like FCA, people who reach out to me to say, I don't know where else to turn. I need help. And I've had the privilege of walking beside people very often in their darkest moments, right? They tell you their deepest, darkest secrets, their fears. They're like, turning to you is my last resort because I'm done. And that's a real privilege. That's a sacred interaction that we don't see person to person very often in modern life. We live in a society that's ruled by digital devices, and there's not as much connection as maybe there once was in the past. But you find those moments, and suddenly I'm on the other side of the table. Right? I went from being the guy that fixes everything, that knows how to navigate the system, the guy that has all the answers, to I'm Googling my test results at 4 a.m. and I'm studying my oncologist's face to figure out if he's telling me the truth. And so it's pretty humbling to flip the script and then suddenly be on the other side of the table.
Thanks for sharing that and that family history. And yeah, my grandfather actually died on the streets, homeless. We found his records. He was buried up at Hart Island, Partis Field, unmarked grave. Can you imagine? And then we haven't been able to locate his remains or anything. But like I said, all of them rose up, and I have many. All became church volunteers, and I have cousins, older cousins, that became nurses and nuns, and my sister's a social worker. So everybody, like you said, to your point, we went in that direction, and here I am doing this podcast about helping people. So thank you for the tie-in. On the cancer front, you say so much about it in the book, your experiences, and for our listeners, you did battle and defeat. I'm going to say defeat cancer twice, and you talk about the parallel between your training and the competition, and your ability to fight and win. Can you talk more about that? About how your training and the way of thinking of pressing ahead helped you in your cancer fights, plural.
Yeah, so the first time I got diagnosed, it was April 1st, 2022. It's just a few months out of completing Ironman Florida. Ironman is a race that includes a 2.4-mile open water swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a full 26.2-mile marathon. And you've got to complete it all in under 17 hours. I did that race in 15 hours and 9 minutes. So I was in the best shape of my life, I thought. And then, I found out via a text message driving down the Northern State Parkway in Melville that I had what they called clinically significant prostate cancer. And so it would turn out to be stage 2 prostate cancer. I had gone for routine medical screening and physical, a week earlier. I had no symptoms. There was nothing wrong with me. I'm in the best health. Just went to be on the safe side. And lo and behold, I get this diagnosis. My first thought was, I just did Ironman Florida. I'm not sick. How could this be? And you quickly learn the difference between health and fitness. I was very fit, but that doesn't mean you can't wind up with a health challenge.
Yeah.
My second thought was, all right, so it looks like I did Ironman Florida with prostate cancer. And so I do hard things. I could do hard things. Ironman Florida for me was a test, and that became a testament to what was possible. And so I'm like, I could deal with cancer. I had cancer and did Ironman. I could deal with a little bit of cancer, not the end of the world. And so I was successfully treated in July of that year, 2022. Went on to race the New York City Marathon in November. I'm back out there. I had my recovery time. I did what I needed to do, and I was back out there. But by then, I had really become an evangelist for routine screenings. And so I did a commercial for the Prostate Cancer Foundation of America. I was out speaking to men's groups about the importance of screening and basically telling the story. I'm a young guy. I'm healthy as could be. I had no symptoms, and lo and behold, I had cancer that if it had gone undetected would have been a really different deal. And so I took my own advice. And so that following year, I went and got a colonoscopy. You probably know where this is going because you read the book. I woke up from the colonoscopy, and the doctor said to me, look, I found a couple polyps, but I also found a significant mass. Those two words together after a medical procedure are never a good thing to hear. And I said, how significant? He's like, it's very significant. And so he said, get an oncology referral on the way out the door. Which I did. If I needed more proof that things weren't good, I was on my Peloton at 7:00 that night trying to ride away from reality, and he called to check on me, and I'm like, you guys don't call to check on people after colonoscopies at 7:00 at night. You're obviously concerned. And he said, yeah, I'm very concerned. You got to go get checked out. And so that would turn out to be stage 3B colorectal cancer. I am not, aside from endurance sports, I'm not a sports guy, but I'm smart enough to know the 3 strikes rule. And so I'm like, 2 cancers in about 14 months, what's coming next? And what does this mean, right? How did this happen? I have no known exposures. I had no symptoms either time. I'm just being on the safe side, and stage 3, every cancer is serious, but stage 3B colorectal cancer has very different survival rates than stage 2 prostate cancer when caught early. And so it was a rude awakening again. And so, again, I was fortunate to have access to good care, and wound up going through 27 rounds of radiation and 35 rounds of chemo. I'm through it. I am good. I am back to racing. But each time, it was like competing in a long race, and my training wound up preparing me for races I never signed up for. And, when you go through, again, any cancer is serious, and everybody's experience is different. And so my experience isn't necessarily reflective of everybody's, but getting through radiation, getting through chemo is like being in a race, and the fatigue you feel, and the discouragement, and the ups and downs out on the race course, where one minute you're feeling pretty good and the next minute you just feel terrible and you wonder if you're going to be able to finish.
Yeah.
We're all present. In fact, I was 2/3 of the way through chemo. I'm part of a clinical trial, and so I got high dose chemo. The good thing is I was able to tolerate that because my fitness was money in the bank. So people are like, yeah, so you exercised all that and you ate right and you still got cancer. Why should I even bother? Well, when they assessed, my treatment options, they're like, you're healthy as could be. You could do this 3-drug combination, whereas the standard is 2. We could probably get away with giving you more chemo. But if your blood counts start to tank out, we're going to put you in a hospital and we're going to stop. And so I said, all right. Not fully meaning that it would be okay. And so 2/3 of the way through chemo, my doctor said to me, he's like, look, your blood counts have tanked. Like, this is probably our break-even point that we should maybe stop. We probably achieved maximum benefit, and your side effects are just, creeping up. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's not going to happen. Like, at the outset, we mapped out a course of treatment that you told me would give me the best shot at long-term survival. So we're finishing it. If I have to go buy chemo on the street, then that's what I'm going to do. But dude, we're finishing this thing. And he's like, I figured you would say that. And I said, look, just do whatever you can to keep me out of the hospital. I'll do whatever I can to stay healthy. And we're going to finish this thing. And so I always equate that particular interaction with the mile 18 of a marathon. But from the time you get the diagnosis, which I equate to like the jitters at the start line, to the time you finish treatment, it's one big long race with ups and downs and highs and lows. The other thing is, although triathlon and marathons are individual sports, right? You're not on a team. You don't do those things alone. Your family makes incredible sacrifices while you're out training. There's thousands of volunteers that keep you safe that day. There's, lifeguards in the water at a triathlon, and there's people at the finish line, and, it's not a solo venture at all. And similarly, in the case of cancer treatment, there's the cumulative wisdom and clinical depth that comes from, many years of biomedical research. There's the nurses, the doctors. For me, my spouse was a key support. And so you don't do triathlon alone, and you definitely don't fight cancer alone.
Thanks for all that. And I have so many questions that are going through my head, but I wanted to get back to something I was talking about earlier, how when you came out of, at one point, you found yourself getting back to talking about human relations and how important people are to each other, and your spouse being there to help you. At one point you said, and I'll see if I can find it, I'm going through the highlights here in the book, is you said you found yourself feeling so alone at one point, even though you had gone through the treatments, you came out okay, but you still found yourself lacking. Do you recall that part in the book? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's important to all this.
Yeah, it was one of those moments. And so it was actually after my first diagnosis, and, my spouse, who then was my girlfriend, we had been dating about 6 months before I got the diagnosis. And I said to her, look, you didn't sign up for this. And if you need to tap out, I completely get it. When she looked at me like I was nuts, and thankfully didn't take me up on the offer. So I couldn't have asked for more support. As soon as, I had a treatment plan, I told my kids, I obviously, have an employer that's very supportive and that kind of thing. So I had, the best case scenario when it came to social supports, but there were still moments where I felt incredibly alone. And my first thought was, it's like, well, yes, because they don't have cancer. Like I'm in this, by myself. I stand or fall on my own in some regards. And at the end of the day, it's my disease. And I think that was part of it. But it was also, I really needed to walk through and confront a lot of stuff. When you hear the words "you have cancer," after the initial shock happens, I mean, your next thought is this it? Right? Yep. Is this the end? And what does that look like? And what will it be like? And what do I believe about all of these things? And so one of the ways I kind of wrestled with this sense of being alone, and I began to put it all together. I'm like, well, no, I'm feeling alone because it's me looking in the mirror, having to do a whole bunch of soul searching about not, when you're younger, it's what do you want your legacy to be? And now after a diagnosis, especially given my age, it really was, all right, what has my legacy been? Right. And you're doing that soul searching all by yourself. Nobody could do that with you. And nobody can resolve some of these big questions with you. And so for me, it was, I feel alone because I'm just looking at myself, having to take an inventory of my life, having to deal with the fear that I'm going to die from this, thinking about the things I'll miss if this is it, and really some deep introspective moments. And so everybody in the world was there for me. I think I was there for myself, but there's that moment of clarity where you just look and say, at the end, it's you by yourself, kind of taking that inventory and kind of processing that, and nobody else can do that with you.
I think that's incredible insightfulness. That is a rare, incredible insightfulness. And I finally found the place in your book. I have it on my Kindle. You said, and I'm going to quote what you said because it's so beautifully written, as are many of the personal observations. You said, immediately after each of my cancer diagnoses, despite a loving partner and a robust support system, I still felt sick, isolated, disconnected, and alone, like it was just me, and I couldn't figure out why. Then I realized I had come face to face with my own soul. Yeah. That is really such incredible writing and observation right there.
Thank you. It was a heavy moment, because we don't get a lot of occasions in life where we could do that in a really serious way.
And so these circumstances, we talk about spirituality and God and God's plan and all that. Sometimes you say, well, is this God's plan or is it not God's plan? I mean, you have to wonder sometimes if something like that was. I'm not saying God gave you cancer on purpose.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
But the ability to look and to observe yourself and then to hit these new plateaus, because now you're able to share this with other people and other people can gain from your consultation and your coaching, which you do, because you had that opportunity to face that. I also wanted to point out some things you said about spirituality and how people were praying for you. And you said, I said a few panicked prayers. This is some of the words you said. And you said, I don't know whether God heard my prayers or those of so many others who were praying for me, but I heard those devotions in a way that reconciled my fighting warrior mentality with the idea of surrendering to God's will. Yeah. I think that's another really incredible thing that observation that I highlighted in the book. And just along those same lines, where you were being introspective about who we are and why we're here and do we last and death and all that. You said we're all. You were actually quoting somebody who said this. We're all made from stardust. I think it was British author Neil Gaiman or Gammon.
Yep.
We're all made from stardust, and a bazillion years ago, we were all mingling and dancing together as one infinitely small, infinitely bright dot in the vast nothingness. Who's to say death is the last time we all get to dance together? And you said it's the perfect image for me, because the quote combines scientific and poetic. And again, I'm going to go back to your writing. I'm a writer. Your writing is poetic in many parts of this book. And that's what I was like, my mouth just dropped, because I'm sorry, but guys, but I don't hear this from guys that often,
Right.
to have this like type of introspection. So I congratulate you on it.
Thank you.
I also want to say, so to your with your consultation and your coaching, do you coach people through these situations? Is that part of what your coaching offers? If they're having a tough time with fighting a debilitating illness or chronic illness?
Yeah, and that's happened in a de facto way, John, because lots of people have picked up the book and then they track me down. It's easy enough to do.
Yes.
And they'll track me down on social media or in some other way and just say, do you have 20 minutes to talk to me, or do you have, can I send you an email? And I'm just happy to do that. And so it's become an important part of my mission. And I'm amazed at, how many people in my life, have gotten a cancer diagnosis or were living with it and I didn't even know. And because I've been so open about it, they come out and have a conversation. There's a funny story, a backstory to that chapter on spirituality, in that I can typically write pretty fast. It doesn't take me a long time to write, but that chapter, it's only 13 pages. I was like at the 6-week mark. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I could have written the entire book over by now with the amount of time this chapter is taking me. And it took me so long because there's so many things that I needed to think through and talk through with myself before I could write about it in a way that made sense. And about 6 weeks in, I thought to myself, well, look, I could, nobody knows the chapter is supposed to be in there. I could just take it out and finish writing the book and publish it and then be good to go. And then I thought about it and said, that would be like mile 18 of a marathon, jumping on a subway, taking it to mile 22, getting off, and then saying, woohoo, I did it, I finished. Like, it's cheating. So I needed to talk through and walk through that spiritual part of things. The piece about people praying for me, I recount in the book, there's a scenario where I'm in a church for a baptism and they're reading off prayers for sick people and I hear my name. And I've got a couple friends, male friends, who I write about in the book, who along those lines would say to me, brother, I'm praying for you every day. And I'm like, I'm not even praying for myself, really. Thank you, because I'm not doing what I should be doing. And the diagnoses really forced me to think about, what do I believe, right? Who do I believe controls all of this? What do I believe about, death and dying? What do I believe happens to you when you die? Lots of fundamental questions like that. I think they're all things that probably we toy with or are kind of dictated to us by organized religion, right? So if I were an active member of a particular religion, that religion would say, here's what we believe about, for example, heaven and hell. I don't necessarily subscribe to a religion that heavily. I'm Episcopalian, which means that we're pretty easygoing about a lot of things. And so I hadn't fully wrestled with those questions because I didn't have to. And so they're things you think about and then you just kind of put aside for a little while until you can sort them through more thoroughly. Well, you get a diagnosis like this, it's like, well, you better start figuring these things out now and figure out what you believe. And so I was thrust into, this thing where I had to begin wrestling with some of these questions. And I don't know that they're fully resolved for me at this point in time. And in fact, I end the chapter by saying, I still don't know a ton of things. I do know that there's a power greater than me. And I do know there's a power greater than cancer. And I've got to trust that what's going to be is going to be, and the best thing I can do is continue to live my life in a way that reflects my values, ideals, and my newfound reality that there's an invisible countdown clock that's ticking above all of our heads. We just don't know it, and we don't know when it's going to go ding, and that's going to be up. And look, for lots of people who experience a sudden tragedy, they don't have the opportunity to do this. And so I look at this and say, I've been given not one but two shots to reconsider my life and make sure that I'm making all of the right decisions, and more importantly, spending time in a way that enriches not only me but the people around me, and that includes my family and the organization I run in my community.
Wonderful. And again, getting back to the human relations part of all this, you say, in many ways, cancer transcends words. So it's not always what you say or what you do, but whether you show up.
Yeah.
And
John, I'm pretty enlightened. I'm pretty woke. I'll use the term. But I had several male friends who, 3 or 4, who, after we would have lunch or dinner, would say to me, "I love you." And the first couple times it happened, I was thrown. And it wasn't like the backslapping, "I love you, man," kind of thing. It was heartfelt and genuine.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to make of it, and so I muttered something off and then got into my car. The first couple times it happened, I literally turned on the light in the car and looked in the rearview mirror and asked myself, do I look that bad? They must think I'm going to die. Like, they think this was like our last supper. Like, I'm checking out. I'm like, no, I don't look that bad. And they said I looked good, and they said I looked pretty healthy, and it seemed like a normal conversation. And it really, eventually I got comfortable with it, but it took me a while to adjust to this notion that I would exchange I love yous in more than a very casual bro hug kind of way with my male friends. And it caught me off guard, because I thought to myself, I've said I love you to lots of women when I didn't necessarily mean it, and I had no problem doing that.
That's something.
And so why is this such a struggle? And so it really, caused me to rethink what my relationship with my male friends was. And, one of the outcomes of this really is my friendships with other men really deepened over the course of time. And in dealing with these diagnoses, people felt compelled to be more open and honest with me about how they felt. And, in return, I felt along the same lines.
That's wonderful. And I was just thinking as you was talking how, like you said, it's so easy for guys to say I love you to member of the opposite sex women. But I realized that after many years, after my kids were grown, our 2 sons were grown, my wife and I haven't said I love you to them. Why did I stop doing it? When they're little kids, I love you, it's like cutie type thing. But once they got older, they were these big hairy guys, and I didn't do it. But then I started doing it, and I realized how that was a piece that was missing that my father didn't do with me. And it wasn't until he was toward the end of his life that we exchanged I love you, and it lifted a huge burden. Like, it lifted something off my shoulders, because I was like, does this man love me or not? And when him saying it, I mean, I knew he did, but just the saying it, and and you do say something about this also, I highlighted. You say, when we feel love towards someone, the brain activates its reward system, and oxytocin, otherwise known as the love hormone, flows. We get that warm rush when we bond with others, whether it be a newborn child, like I was just saying about my kids when they were young, a romantic connection, the gals, for me and for you, or a deep friendship. It doesn't say whether it's male or female. I'm paraphrasing around you, by the way. Yeah. It's chemistry. It's human chemistry. Oxytocin, along with dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, are often referred to as our happy hormones, which can decrease stress and anxiety levels when released into certain parts of the brain. The mental health and physical health benefits are unequivocal. And you went on to quote some statistics. And I could actually read the whole book here if you let me, so I'm going to stop for a second and let you comment. But, it goes back to what you were saying. And I also wanted to point out to everyone, and hopefully people will pick up the book and see, but you also do not claim to have all the answers, or you say, this is simple stuff, guys. I'm paraphrasing you. This is simple stuff. I'm just saying like what people normally say, but I'm saying it my way, and I'm telling you what I went through. You don't have all the answers,
Right.
Like you were saying previously.
Yeah, and the folks I speak to, I'm very clear in saying, I'm a guy who had cancer twice, no more, no less, right? And so, I'm not able to give you medical advice. You have an oncologist for that. I might be able to share my story, but that's where it begins and ends, and take what you like and leave the rest from that story. I have been able to give some objective, I think, advice to people who say, sometimes when a friend is diagnosed, I don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. And I've said to them, say that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to say to you. I'm sorry that you're going through this, and I don't know what else to say to you. We're all good with that. I would rather that than people say, I had a number of people who looked at me and said, you're going to be fine. Mm. And I could be confrontative when I want to. And so on a couple occasions, I said, that's reassuring. How do you know that? Because I don't know that. My oncologist isn't willing to guarantee me that. He uses very guarded terms.
Yeah.
How do you know I'm going to be fine? Right. And so, I've become pretty good at identifying, here's all the things not to say. Don't tell me about, your Uncle Bill that took all natural supplements and managed to beat pancreatic cancer. On the flip side, don't tell me about the relative who died within 3 days of diagnosis either. And so cancer is a very unique set of diseases. It's not one disease. And so I always say to people, simply be there. Also, I had folks who are like, if you need anything, just call me. There is zero chance I'm going to call you, right? And so if you want to do something to help, take a stab at doing something, even if it's not that helpful. I'm going to thank you anyway, and it's going to be meaningful. I wasn't one of these folks that needed meal trains or soup delivered to my door and that kind of thing. Had somebody done that, I would have been like, all right, I like soup, it's fine. It's a really nice idea and a nice gesture, and this person clearly cares very, very deeply. So the other piece of advice I give to folks is, if you want to do something to help somebody who's struggling, just do it. Don't do the open-ended, I'm here if you need anything. Of course we need something. You've just been given a life-changing diagnosis. And look, sometimes you don't know what it is you need. Sometimes you need that male friend to say, I love you. Sometimes you just need a text from someone that says, I know you have a scan this morning. I just wanted to wish you well as you go into that scan. And, my male friends who are generally very forgetful, and we're guys, right? I had a bunch of male friends who remembered when I said, I've got a test in 2 weeks, and evidently they wrote it down or put it on the calendar. But on those mornings, I got texts from my male friends saying, I know today's a big day. I hope it goes okay. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff goes far. It goes a lot further than anything else. Just remember what we're going through. And if you're unsure as to what to say, it's fine to say that too. There's times when people said to me, I don't really know what to say. And I said, good, me neither. I'm thrown by this entire thing. Sometimes we don't have to exchange words. Just acknowledging that this is a pretty big deal. Just, it means the world.
Yeah. And I sometimes people stay away too, because they assume that, well, it's just like an automatic thing. Same thing with grief. Some people will just not talk to you. Yeah. They'll just assume I need to stay away. They're sick, they're convalescing, or they're grief. And grief is sort of like in that category too, where, but if you just get it how are you doing? I'm here, is so huge. Getting back to cancer, you quote some stats in the book. You said about 42% of American men and just over 37% of women will develop cancer during their lifetimes, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's nuts. That's like 1 out of every 2 men almost. And I know that, and as you know, talk about the screening, how important it is. I had a PSA that jumped just a tiny bit over what the normal increase.
Right, normal is 4, right.
And they just went all out. I had to go to the urologist and get retested and go through all extra stuff. And I was grateful for that, because if that didn't happen, God knows, it could have just escalated very quickly. I also had one time, and another is in terms of screening and how important it is, that I had a spot on my chest wall, And I wasn't going to mention it to my doctor. I thought it was a mole. That looked unusual. But I said, maybe I should mention it. And I mentioned it. He said, oh, you have to get that checked. I had it checked. And I got a call. Talk about, you said when they call, you know something's up.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor said it's melanoma and you got to have that taken care of. It's very serious. I said, what happens if I don't have it taken care of? What do you mean serious? He says, you'll be gone in 6 months.
Right.
That's how rapid these things move. And I was very lucky. It was in early stage and I didn't have to go through treatments or anything. I just had to have it removed. But I go for my skin screenings. I go for my PSA every year. I'm due for my colonoscopy in October. As you say in the book, it's not a pleasant experience, but it's well worth like the 20, whatever it is, half hour of discomfort you're going to go through when you have to drink that stuff. And then go for the test, which is once you're out, you're out, and it's not really a big deal. I've got actually starting to look forward to that part of it when they put me under.
The best sleep you'll ever have.
Yes.
My friends who say, look, I don't want a prostate exam, and I don't want to prep for the colonoscopy. It's yucky, it's embarrassing, and I'm like, you know what? At one point in time, I went to 88 medical appointments in a year. You want to see yucky, embarrassing, and intrusive? Come take a walk with me, and I'll show you yucky, intrusive, and embarrassing.
I want to get to some preventive stuff aside from exercise and the mindful stuff. We were talking about. You talked about some things that can possibly help. Again, you're not a medical person. You're just saying some studies like drinking coffee. I think you said you're quoting them. Harvard. Yeah. Said that patients diagnosed with stage 1, 2, 3 colorectal cancer who consumed at least 4 cups of coffee per day had a 52% lower risk of dying from the disease compared to those who don't drink. And there's a bunch of things like this.
Yeah.
I drink coffee now. I drink tea. I eat blueberries. I like to, since I had the melanoma diagnosis, I'm doing everything I can. I'm hedging my bets, so to speak.
Yeah.
But you also said to go out and enjoy something. I think you said something about going and eating, I don't know, some comfort food.
A milkshake and French fries.
That
Soon
was
after I was diagnosed, I did exactly what you're not supposed to do. I went to a crowded place, a casino in Connecticut, and for lunch, for the first time in my life, I had a milkshake and French fries, and I didn't feel bad about it for 1 second. And there was a part of me that was like, I don't have cancer. What's the difference? I might as well, do whatever. So, that was a fleeting thought. And so I think it's like everything in moderation, right? There are people who get diagnosed and say, I'm not going to eat red meat. I'm not going to drink any wine. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I don't know. That's not the way I choose to live my life. I do want to reduce my risk, and so I'm going to be smart about it. But I'm also now smart enough to know you should have a little bit of fun. Have the damn milkshake every once in a while. It's not going to kill you.
Thank you, because I got really fanatical for a while. I became a vegan. I was thin as a rail. I didn't have the energy to exercise. I mean, I was just going all out, like everything had to be perfect. And I found myself mentally starting to depreciate because I was going to social occasion. I wasn't able to socialize. I had to bring my own, vegetarian hot dogs with me. I'm not saying vegetarianism is not good, but I was just so fanatical about it that I wasn't enjoying my life. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting back to that, getting back to the balance. I wanted to talk now about your organizations. If we'd like to talk more about FCA and what you guys do.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the organization has been around for 141 years. I haven't been there for all of those years, though some days it feels like it, and sometimes I look like it. We run 60 different programs. We serve about 36,000 people a year, and it's only Nassau and Suffolk, so it's people in Nassau and Suffolk. And those programs range from a nursery school in the village of Hempstead to the only shelter in Nassau County for runaway homeless and trafficked kids, to 2 addiction treatment centers, outpatient centers, 3 recovery centers called Thrive, senior programs, and so really designed to fill all the gaps in life. And everything we do is focused on lifting people up. So we do a lot of vocational work and job development in the village of Hempstead with folks that are wrestling with poverty. We help seniors to stay in their homes because that's a real struggle these days. And on Long Island, one of the fastest growing populations are people over the age of 80. Given the opioid crisis, we have doubled down on services for folks that might be struggling with a substance use disorder. As much as we talk about fentanyl, alcohol still kills more people than fentanyl. It just takes longer. And so we focus on that. And, lately the emerging issues are in the behavioral health space really focus on an upswing in cannabis use among young people and then problem gambling among young people. And so last year we opened up 2 problem gambling treatment centers in Hicksville and Hempstead. So, we've got 360 staff. Most of our money comes from government, which these days is a blessing and a curse all at the same time. And quite frankly, I love it. I've worked for progressively larger organizations. Yeah. And I think in part, because each time it was an ability to expand my impact in terms of the number of people whose lives would be changed by the work. And, although I still take calls from people, mostly elected officials, their relatives, corporate folks, where they've got a loved one that's struggling mostly with addiction or a mental health condition. We've got staff and volunteers, 360 staff and as many volunteers out on the street, doing everything they can to try to make things just a little bit better for folks that are struggling out there. And one of my big takeaways in doing this work is that, there's something magical that happens in that exchange. And I've always felt that when I help people, I actually get more than I give. But I've also come to understand that sometimes people just need just a little bit of help and they can go on to achieve, just plain amazing things.
That is such an important observation, because I was talking to somebody recently about all this stuff about, and without getting political, it's like, why do certain people, why aren't they able to thrive? How come they can't work their way up the ladder? How come they can't? And it could be something, it could be that there is a issue. It could be like it could be a mental health issue. It could be a disease. It could be they have some sort of disorder that needs to be treated medically. But it also could be what you're talking about. Just a little bit of support can make such a huge difference. And I do know of Thrive Recovery Centers, and I think they do incredible work. And I wanted to ask you, how, in terms of funding, is the state funding? I know we're in New York State, by the way. I live in New York State. Dr. Reynolds does too. How are things going from that perspective? Are you getting the same amount of support in the past, or has any shift been made due to issues going on in the political world? Dancing around.
We got some other programs affected by federal cuts, and in this day and age, you wake up and you see an email from, this happened to us 2 weeks ago, where we woke up and had an email at 12:21 in the morning that funding was cut for a program and it got restored 24 hours later. And that's just like living on a roller coaster, similar to the way our clients do. But the money for Thrive, it comes from New York State, and that's been stable. Good. You asked if it's the same it's been, and the answer is yes. And that's not a good thing, because the money for Thrive that we get, Thrive is now heading into its 10-year anniversary. The money has remained the same, but the costs haven't remained the same. And so I've got a landlord that wants a 4% increase every year, and I've got staff who, are not making nearly enough money that would like a little bump occasionally. And so everything goes up. And so we've been fortunate to be able to fundraise the difference between what the state pays and the actual costs. And really, it's about community coming together. So we have 3 Thrive centers now, one in Nassau and 2 in Suffolk, going out to Riverhead. And all in, we serve about 10,000 people. And when folks say, well, what's the difference between a recovery center and a rehab? I explain it this way. Rehabs are designed to help you take drugs out of your life. Mm-hmm. Recovery centers help you put really good stuff back into your life.
Great.
And unless you do both at the same time, somebody's going to stumble and relapse again and again and again. And so you can kick a 20-bag-a-day heroin habit, and if the only thing you have to look forward to is playing Xbox in mom and dad's finished basement, the likelihood of your success diminishes and just drops. And that's why we see very high relapse rates sometimes. But if I can help you write your resume and get back to work and socialize with other sober people and figure out how to express yourself in a way, that doesn't involve drugs or alcohol, and figure out how to relax in a way that doesn't require a pill or a potion or a powder, then we've helped you get forward. So I've always felt like those recovery centers have been the missing part of the equation when it comes to treating substance use disorder. And look, it's been a blessing that we've been able to run 3 of them.
Great. And so if people on Long Island in the Nassau Suffolk area can go to a Thrive Recovery Center, just walk in, correct?
Just walk in. Yeah. All pathways to recovery are welcome. People have different definitions of recovery. We don't discriminate. Come down, hang out. Look, we've got folks that are sober curious who are like, I don't know if what I'm doing is a problem or not, and so I just want to get exposure to sober folks, and generally they figure out, all right, well, I'm in the right place, this is a good thing to do. But yeah, so FCA has a website, it's fcali.org. You'll probably put it in the show notes, but if folks are curious, you can find us online, Family and Children's Association, and I'm easy enough to find online via social media because people do it all the time.
Great. Thank you for that. And I will, it's a reminder of what's out there, because I was making an observation to someone recently when all the cuts started happening with Doge and people were like running around, oh my God. I said, we could still do things, We can give money. We can go out and volunteer at a food pantry. We can go to a Thrive Recovery Center. There are still things. It's not like the whole world is being cut off from us. So I encourage everybody, you'd be surprised. My local parish has a food pantry. If people are not, and I'm just saying this for general, wherever people are, it's not just the federal government that offers money and assistance. There are other places, private and statewide, that offer assistance. So take advantage of it if you need it. Hopefully you don't need it, but if you do so.
Yeah.
So I want to get back and just, I want to thank you. We had a great conversation, I feel, and we went over the book, Every Mile Matters, Turning Triathlon Training into Cancer Triumph by Dr. Jeffrey L. Reynolds. And that book is available on Amazon. You also have a website. I'll put that in the notes too, as we said. And to also reach out to FCA and Thrive Recovery Centers if people need assistance in the New York State area. And I want to thank you so much for being so frank with me and taking your busy schedule out, because you're a CEO of this company. You're president and CEO. I'm talking to a president and CEO here, folks, and I know how precious your time is. So thank you so much for spending the time with me.
Well, John, thanks for having me on. This has been a really thoughtful conversation, and thank you for preparing so thoroughly, and thanks for your own introspection in doing this. As you do the show, you're helping amplify not only my voice, but the voice of people who want to be heard and feel like we have a valuable message to share with your audience. So thank you for everything you do, and thank you for a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. This has been the John Passadino Show, and we are beaming out to all the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts and the rest, Spotify, and the video of this will be on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching it now, but tell your friends and family about it. Tell your friends and family about the book. Check out the book. Check out FCA and Thrive, and we'll talk to you next time.
This has been the John Passadino Show.
Streaming on all platforms.
Spread the word.